Google it, look it up, but you'll find that praxis is a Greek word. And what the Greek word actually means is the doing, the practice, the enacting. But it's the enacting of something. So it's not good enough just to be an actor. You have to be enacting something that is founded and based in something. So the idea of praxis, the course, is that it's a grounded doing. So you're grounded in theory, you're learning the physics, you're learning the civil engineering, you're learning the structures, you're learning the algebra and the calculus and the programming and all of those things. You're learning those, and we're about the doing.
We want to know why you picked that material. We want to know why that particular circuit. What were you thinking? Are you trying to go for safety or cost or function? That's the element that adds a bit of the theory. But if all you've done is do some really cool equations and say, you know what, if I have a catapult and I put it at 45 degrees, we want you to test that, because turns out when you add in friction and a few other elements, 45 degrees may not always work the best. The key is to then bounce back and forth and say, well, if I want to be like this, what can I learn that allows me to grow really, really fast, and then how can I make that into something I can build, and back and forth and back. So that interplay is what's really key, but most students have never been forced to bounce in between.
You can do all of the tasks of praxis and never get the course. All right, that's possible. What we hope you do is we hope that you start to look at the world as a designed entity. Start saying, why? Why that material? Why that choice? Why that design? Why that shape?
If I look at this particular chair, this particular table as chemistry, what does that enable me to see differently? The other thing you do is you say, and what would I do differently?
Or how could I make it better?
Make it better, make it different. How can I make it even reflect me? We might take the exact same table and redesign it in two different ways, and they're both awesome designs. There isn't a best design. There's merely a design that better reflects the values that were brought to it.
Thinking about the communication sort of aspects of the course, you do a fair bit of writing, especially in the first term. You do some oral presentation. You do a lot of team discussion. So pushing yourself to get more comfortable with that. Pushing yourself to write regularly, even if it's only a paragraph. If you start that now in July, it'll be familiar by the time you hit in September, and it will just make life that much easier.
What do all those little symbols on the turn over a toaster and you'll suddenly find something to do over the summer? Go to your local library. Talk to a librarian and learn how to figure out what those little symbols are.
Work hard to express yourself dispassionately. So often we get worked up, and we want to get our idea on the table. We think we have the best one, and so often we see that it's the student who's kind of held back, and when finally pushed forward, that student actually has some really great ideas.
I think one of the real challenges that comes up is people have different priorities, and they don't always synchronize in time. They don't always synchronize in space. So there needs to be, I think, that flexibility to acknowledge that there is this difference of circumstance, and to say, okay, here are the key parts of what we're doing where we should be together, and here are the parts where we can be separate. To be blunt, the transition can be overwhelming.
We often in Praxis will kind of encourage you to study smart as opposed to study hard. Part of studying smart is saying, okay, if this assignment is only worth 2%, how much time do I really give it? Sometimes you're actually going to throw in the towel on 2% and say, well, I'm going to lose those two, or I'm going to only take one of them because it's not worth spending another 5 hours debugging this code.
How to succeed in NSI is judgment, and it's judgment as to what is the best use of my time. You really can't separate design and communication. A great idea in your head that you can't share versus something that looks great on paper but hasn't been fully thought out, neither of those is complete. You already kind of know how to think like a mathematician and think like a scientist. Very few of you have ever actually thought, how do I think in terms of a communicator and an engineer? Engineers describe their challenges and their opportunities and their problems and their desires a little bit differently than other disciplines. And so part of what Praxis is going to teach you and ask you to do is to take, wow, that's a really horrible ketchup bottle, and turn that into something that an engineer can look at and say, okay, so we need a ketchup bottle that this, This is what we can't do, this is what we must do, so then they can get moving and actually do it.
Engineering communication tends to be very straightforward, kind of blunt, to the point. It's argument-driven. Those are perhaps some of the fundamental differences to what people may have experienced before.
All the way through, there's sort of this little fractal piece of, okay, what are you trying to do? What are ways you can do it? What's the way you're going to go with? Diverge, converge. If you are used to finding out what your instructors want and then just giving it to them, well, what you'll find is your instructors, there's always two of them, and they'll disagree a lot. They're both grading you, because otherwise it would be too easy. So now you've got to figure out, okay, if I can't please both at the same time, either I can pick one, or I can say, you know what? I'm just going to do what's right. I'm going to do what I think is best based on what I've learned, based on what you've said. But this is what I believe, and here's why, and here's what I've done. If you look at how we assess, it's all about, did you bring it together, and are you aware of what you've been doing and how you've been doing it?
Studio is an integral part of Praxis. In fact, in many ways, Studio is at the center of Praxis, and the lectures are designed to support what's happening in Studio. And the studios are groups of 25 to 30 students, and this is where your teamwork happens. And we start the course by doing a teardown exercise, where we take something that exists and we pull it apart. And we say, all right, what were the designers thinking? What was the design process that went into that?
Who cares how it works? We don't care how it works.
Yeah, it works. Or doesn't, because often people will bring in artifacts that no longer work. Grandma's dead toaster, that kind of thing. So Studio is the place where you are actually doing the praxis. It's where your team meets to do the design. We take you through these things in stages so that you're not just sort of said, oh yeah, go do. It's very structured in order to help you learn the structure and gain the thinking that goes into that.
But one of the things that the best designers and the best engineers do is that they are able to develop an understanding and an empathy with someone else. And so in Praxis 2, the idea is we want you, in fact we demand, that you go out into the broader city and find a community. And then through that discussion and through getting to know these folks, say, you know what? Wouldn't it be awesome if this was different? You say, okay, how do we turn this into an engineering type situation that we can address?
But it's the old faster horse question, right? So maybe it was Henry Ford who said, if you ask people what they want, they wouldn't say an automobile, they'd say a faster horse. So it may be that the community you're working with actually doesn't see their way to what they really want or what they really need, because could use, because they're still stuck with wanting a faster horse.
That was me imitating a bat.
That hurt my ears.
I figured I should interpret my hypersonic or ultrasonic
That could have been a dolphin.
One of the things that a lot of students do is they tend to bring assumptions that we don't actually have. Students will think, I can't do this, or I must do this, or they'll read the assignment and say, they want me to do this. What we want you to do is to read it and then make it your own. We decided that one of the really important things about engineering science relative to other programs is that you've got to figure out who you are, because no one knows what engineering science is. I say civil engineer and a vision pops into your head. I say electrical and a vision pops into your head. I say NSci, it's like, oh. So one of the big things in Praxis is to say, okay, well, you're in engineering, and you're really, really brilliant, and you're really, really dedicated, so who are you going to be?